It's not if we should change, it's almost how we should change.
Hi there. Hi, Dennis. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Exciting.
Yeah. Do you mind just introducing yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Denis Morais. I'm the co-CEO of SSI, which creates a solution for the shipbuilding industry. I've been working for SSI, I don't even know, I think about 18 years. My role and responsibility is focused on business vision, strategy, also product development, professional services, dabble a little bit into the sales and so forth. So pretty much the whole wrap of the organization, how we're moving forward in this, we'll say, digital transformation and exciting times that we have forward for us in our industry.
Well, yeah, you have been with SSI for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
How did you get started with SSI and why are you still here?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I started pretty much from almost the mailroom, to use that old analogy. And it started with, I was working at a job before where it was, I guess there was more on log optimization. So it's used to scan logs, find the best way to cut it and so forth. And SSI at that time was just in the same city. And I thought it was quite interesting and about the organization and just, having shipbuilding on the West Coast, which, we have ships coming all the time, but it's just never really a shipbuilding city, I would say. It's more tourism and technology. So it was just interesting. So when I went into the interview, I just kind of thought it was really, really interesting. And then when I got the job and so forth and moving forward, the complexities and interestingness of the shipbuilding was quite interesting in the case of just, it moves the economy. It just moves, everything is relying on shipbuilding, but also the whole, or shipping, sorry. But the whole idea where shipbuilding has a long lineage of time and a lot of the traditions that have happened with what we're doing today may not make sense by itself, but you can kind of see how it evolved. So the interest and what probably kept me with shipbuilding is two aspects. One is that it is super complex. I would argue that it's the most complex manufacturing industry out there today, even though it might not be the most complex engineering project, like if you look at automotive or aerospace or anything like that. But to manufacture is very, very complex. And it just had a lot of room for improvement. So there's just a lot of learning and being able to change and affect the industry. So that's what really has kept me into shipbuilding and my interest in shipbuilding, which I absolutely love.
Well, having been in the industry for so long now and loving it, what do you think is kind of your unique perspective? What do you bring that someone else might not?
The uniqueness, I think, is I would say my intersection of my three passions. And one is, I love shipbuilding, so I understand shipbuilding quite well. And I'm a technology guy. I've been a big technology guy my whole entire life. But the whole idea of implementing this technology and getting it into something that would work for the business of shipbuilding, which is that business aspect, is something that I think is being lost. And I think one thing that I guess I try to do well in. So the ability to understand the challenges that we're trying to achieve, the technology that is possible, but the realities of how we can actually implement this technology and transform the business so that we don't affect our current business, but can also provide a path to the future vision that we're trying to achieve. So I would say that intersection between technology, business, and the business of shipbuilding.
Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean with the business of shipbuilding? How is that different from just saying shipbuilding?
Well, the idea of the business of shipbuilding is there's just so many aspects of shipbuilding than just building the asset. The ship is just one aspect of it. The idea of the amount of stakeholders you require to coordinate and communicate at the beginning before a ship is even determined to be built, to coordinating your resources, your supply chain, and so forth. There's a whole business of how everything is going to flow to get to your end goal. So when you think of shipbuilding, it's not just building the aspect, it's the whole idea of how the industry works. So one example, which is somewhat unique to shipbuilding, is the way that ships are actually purchased, I guess. And the whole idea is that when you invest in for a ship, you're actually paying for the delivery of certain milestones of your ship. So the business of shipbuilding there is that the business is for the shipyard is really focused on trying to make the next milestone, because they have to get the next paycheck to pay the employees and so forth and other aspects. So they're pretty much incentivized to actually cut steel very, very quickly, because that is what is actually tied to the milestone. So that whole idea of that, the business of shipbuilding, that's actually how it works. That you would have to change that aspect if you want it to work in a different way. So that's kind of one example of many of how shipbuilding is unique. So it's just everything that gets tied into it. So from financials to actually creating your asset.
So would you say that that's what drives everything, is those timelines, and that's really what differentiates shipbuilding from every other manufacturing industry?
Yeah, one of them. I think the what makes it unique is that from a shipbuilding, which a lot of people don't know, is that because you're motivated to cut steel ahead of time, that your ship is really designed. I say 50% usually when I say anything, but it's usually a lot less than that. If your ship is 50% designed before you cut your first piece of steel, you're doing very, very well. So what happens? So that's the first uniqueness. But what ends up happening later on, where you having your designing, your procuring, and your construction all at the same time, that is really where the huge uniqueness and the complexity of shipbuilding happens, where you're trying to make these changes and you have this design, but you haven't even built it yet. So you can imagine if you're starting to build a ship at the beginning, if you have a system or something that has to change later on, it's going to get affected. So that's definitely going to be one area where shipbuilding is unique. But also with that, every ship is unique. And I know in many other industries, even aerospace, every airplane is slightly different, but they don't have the amount of differences that shipbuilding has across the same ship. So the first ship and the second ship can have 10, 15, 20% differences, which is substantial, which also is somewhat unique to shipbuilding. So there's a saying that shipbuilding, you're always creating a prototype. That's in essence what you're always creating. You're always creating your first prototype.
You touched on earlier about how these timelines are kind of a legacy of the old way of doing things and the tradition of shipbuilding. You've been in the industry for almost 20 years. What's been the biggest change in how the industry is approaching shipbuilding and the way they do their work?
I think the biggest change is their understanding of that there has to be a change. So when we're looking at a lot of the discussions that we're having now, it's not if we should change, it's almost how we should change. So there's been some improvement in a lot of different aspects, but the overall mechanisms of the process and I would say the business of shipbuilding hasn't changed yet. I think we're in a pivot point there that it's going to happen soon. However, we do see a lot of innovation in shipbuilding, from driving other technologies, from production automation and so forth. Class societies are actually being quite innovative. I would say in the last 3 to 5 years, they're probably one of the two areas where I would say is innovating the most and making the most changes by even just certifying your vessel digitally. They're all big motivations on that, as well as when they're doing inspections, doing a lot of laser scanning and finding new ways to do imaging to figure out if there's issues that are with your vessel, and even using drones and so forth. So there's a lot of innovation in that area. But then again, there's some areas where, like I would say, autonomous vessels that's being looked at, and there's been a couple being built and so forth. But that's another area that they're kind of looking into. But I still think that has to be some significant transitions on the way that we create our asset for those innovations to take be more prevalent across the industry.
Are the changes happening just because the technology's here and it's available now and it's slowly kind of trickling down into the industry, or is it something else that's driving the changes?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. It's one that the technology is definitely mature, because shipbuilding, I would never say shipbuilding will be a cutting or bleeding edge industry. It's just the assets, the timelines just don't really align for that. But we can be, technically advanced. So I think one thing is that now when we see these technologies a little bit more mature and there's some good use cases, being able to apply it has been one pillar of the reason why we're starting to see some more adoption. The other one, which I think is probably more and probably where we have to even grow a little bit more, is the culture and mindset. So when you come from a more conservative industry, people have a certain mindset and culture about being very risk adverse. And that's a very common thing that we have in shipbuilding. And I think the whole thing is that as this technology is coming out, maturity, there may be growing from a leadership perspective. I don't want to say it's an age thing, because I see there's a lot of, both different spectrums of just thinking about the problem differently. So I would say the other pillar would be that the mindset and the culture of accepting change or being a little bit less risk adverse, understanding that there might be a little bit of risk and just taking calculated risks. So I think those two areas are probably what is driving that.
I think anyone who's read your blogs or watched you present has always known you to be interested in mindset and culture. Yeah. Is there a reason why it's such a passion of yours and it keeps coming up to the surface?
Well, it's definitely, yeah, well, it's a passion for me, because that's probably, if I would say that one thing that would change any business, and I don't care what industry you are, is your mindset and culture. I truly believe with an organization that has, again, good people with a good mindset and culture, they can pretty much accomplish anything. So that is one of the reasons why I find it a huge passion. And also from our internal organization, with us focusing on our people and culture and how much easier it makes us to create innovative solutions, really was something that have, or I guess, proof in the pudding, and have real world experience. But I think really culture and mindset is probably one of the things that we don't talk about in shipbuilding. It just seems too soft. But again, with the right people and with the right culture, it doesn't almost matter what your process is. It doesn't matter what technology you have. And this is coming from a technology vendor or partner. But I think with the culture, there's just the problems become easier. So anything that we're doing with the digital transformation, if we are able to have a good foundation, which again, I think is the people, mindset, and culture, it just makes everything else a lot easier. You don't have to have everything worked out, that things will be worked out as they kind of go.
Do you think there's a fear element to it, like a fear of culture change, a fear of progress?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a fear. I would say that it's tough. Like changing your idea of how you actually look at a problem is very hard. Dealing with people, managing people, and it's not even just managing, it's now actually leading people, is very, very difficult. And I think that is one of the reasons why teams don't, or organizations don't focus on it, because it's hard. But because it's hard is the reason why it's actually has so much value. So I'm not sure if it's fear per se. I know there's always that thought of people fear change. And the whole thing is, I'm not sure if that's true, but not 100% true, because if you are doing change and if you're able to communicate why your organization needs to do the change and incorporate those people that are required to change into the decision-making process, it would make it a little bit easier for them to adopt change. So it's not so much that they're afraid of change, they're just, afraid of change that they weren't really involved in and so forth. So so that's kind of the foundation, I think, of everything is the people and culture.
Do you think that's the biggest missing piece in a shipyard strategy today? Kind of, if you're a shipbuilding executive, is that the one piece you focus on?
I think that's, I would say, it's hard to say yes or no. I think one of the first ones is that the organization has to define their goal and their vision. I think that's step number one. And the reason being is that even with great people, if you don't have a good direction of where you're kind of going or what you want to be, your team, your people will actually push you to a different direction. So if I was going to prioritize it, which is always tough, is defining a good goal, vision, and strategy, and then having good people and process, or good people and culture, and that have a good mindset of where you're going. So it's probably number two.
Why can't you just find the right vendor, find the right solution, implement it, and have it work? Why is culture the thing that needs to happen as well?
Well, because nothing's ever that easy. There's always problems that come to day, and with shipbuilding, because you have thousands and thousands of partners and suppliers and tools, and then in your organizations you have thousands of people that are day making decisions. If you can have that alignment from your goal and vision with the good culture and mindset of embracing change, things are going to happen, and being able to make those day-to-day decisions, I think, are a necessity. It's just going to happen in shipbuilding, but it's actually in every single industry, even in our organization, which is in a lot of cases smaller than many shipyards. This stuff needs to happen. So I think that is is important.
Just kind of switching gears back towards your history and your long kind of tenure at SSI. Is there a particular project or maybe some kind of achievement or accomplishment that you work towards here that's influenced where you are now and what you think of the industry going forward? I
have a couple. I guess the ones internally, I'm very proud of how SSI is as an organization. If I just said even internally and how we view ourselves externally, or how people view us externally, being, again, following our principles of being open and authentic and being disciplined and focused. So that is definitely one area that I'm very happy with SSI internally, and how we interact with external partners and vendors and so forth. From more of the direction where I'm happy where SSI is seeing, I guess the saying that I say quite often is where the puck is going to go, and knowing where that industry is being moving, and see how people are, or how our industry is moving to how they are there today. So to kind of give you an example, is one of the things that we kind of saw is that people require their information. There's a lot of systems that are required in any shipyard or any business of shipbuilding platform or platforms. That information has to be able to flow freely. And for this, a organization there's not one single organization that is going to own what we're calling now the digital twin and digital thread. And for that to be, for any organization that wants to participate in this, platform or network of platforms, they have to, from a philosophy perspective, believe that they are a piece of a bigger puzzle, that they're not the one and only organization that's going to own all the data, that's going to solve all the customer problems. And the reason why I find that important from where we were, 10, 15 years ago and to where we are now, is that it really makes us, when we're making these decisions of how we're solving a problem, it really helps us to make the right decision, so that where we are today, where our information is easily accessible and connected to many different partners and so forth, was just a good strategy. So that's definitely one thing of back in the day of looking forward to where we need to be, and being actually in the right spot is kind of probably very exciting accomplishment, I think. And it's not just myself, obviously, it's the whole team and many stakeholders there. So
you mentioned that idea of connecting the information, and it's something we see come up a lot, but can you kind of describe what that actually means and what that comes down to at the end of the day?
Yeah, so connecting information. So the whole idea is there's many different activities that is required to build a ship. And even a lot of organizations, you can look at any organization today, big or small, and there's many different applications that they use to satisfy different activities. And the idea is that these activities don't happen in a silo, that you most likely will have to consume information that was created from a previous phase or previous date that came from a different system. And you are generating information that is driving other systems that will be used downstream. So how do you connect this information so that what you're creating and using can be leveraged downstream? So the idea of it being disconnected in a lot of cases, which we're all aware of, the Excel world where you put in your Excel and then it's your little silo and then no one has that access to that information. So connection is allowing the information being across your organization to have a connection and have a life cycle.
Is this actually happening in shipyards, or is it still kind of a nice idea, nice to have?
Yeah, I think it's always happened to some extent at a small scale. Because before, if we even look at where our transition to where we are now, when shipbuilding was more, or when the computers came out and 3D CAD came out, we were one of the industries that had leveraged it quite a bit, or even just the 2D. And what ended up happening, we were getting all these different applications, and we saw enough value in connecting these systems that we were creating ad hoc connections between all these different applications. The challenge that we had at that time is that with all these connections, that it was just hard to maintain. So we saw the value in connecting it and the need to connect it, but maintaining all these connections with all these different applications just wasn't sustainable. It created a house of cards. So that is really what transitioned to us where we're at now, to put a higher priority on connecting information, that you have to have a system that has this information, but it has to be able to connect to other systems. So for example, when you have your CAD environment or your design environment, one requirement is like, I have to connect this information to my MRP or ERP system because I have to purchase what is designed. So there has to be a better connection. So there's more awareness and more understanding. However, with that being said, it's probably not as connected as we want, and it should be. A lot of the digital transformations, or I would say business transformations people are going through, is really about connecting that information in a more streamlined way. So we are doing it to a certain extent, but definitely not to the level that we need to, especially if we want to be a lot more streamlined.
And do you think we'll get there 10 years, 20 years? I know you don't like making predictions, but.
Yeah. Well, the prediction, which I'm pretty sure I'd be 100% right, is in 10 years, we'll be better off than we are now. No. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would say 10 years, there would be a stronger, without saying that it will just be better than we are today, it's hard to say. I don't think that if you take people's vision of where they want to be or where they think they should be today, take that as a snapshot, I don't know if we will attain that within the 10 years. I think in some organizations we'll be close, but I think some will not. So it's hard to say, sorry.
And then just kind of a fun one, because I know we're running out of time here. I just wanted to ask you, if you could get every shipbuilding executive to agree on one thing, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm trying to think of something that would be focused on, again, the culture and the mindset, but more for the understanding that we have to collectively move the industry forward. Yeah, that's a good question. I would have to think about that one, actually.
We'll get back to you. All right. Well, that's everything I had for today. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining me. And I really appreciate getting a chance to chat with you.
Great. Thanks. It was fun. Thank you very much.